Hello and welcome to Mickeyology, where we take Disney a little too seriously. I'm Austin Rathall, and today we're examining Disney and Pixar's Brave. Brave is unique among Pixar's movies. Pixar tends to tell modern stories with offbeat characters, but with Brave, they tried their hand at a fairy tale fantasy starring a princess protagonist. Merida even became an official Disney princess in 2013. So when and where does Pixar's princess picture take place? Let's examine some clues and find out. Determining where Brave takes place is pretty easy. We've got kilts and bagpipes, we've got blue body paint and Highland games, we've got haggis. So it shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone to find out that Brave takes place in Scotland. The movie even gives us a glimpse at a map that shows us that the clans in the movie all live in northern Scotland. Therefore, we know that Brave takes place in the Scottish Highlands. Determining when the movie takes place is more difficult. Lucky for us, many of the places we see in Brave were based on real historic sites. If we can find out when those sites were constructed, that could give us an idea of when the film takes place. Pixar sent a team of filmmakers to Scotland to do research for Brave. One of the most stunning sites they visited was the Callanish Stones. Ancient Scots constructed this mysterious monument sometime between 2900 and 2600 BC, so Brave obviously takes place after that. Animators also visited two castles that inspired the design of Merida's Dunbroch Castle. Elan Donan Castle, built sometime in the mid-13th century, and Dunatar Castle, built in 1392. Since Castle Dunbroch is modeled on these castles, Brave likely takes place sometime during or after the 1300s. Thanks to the places in Brave, we now have a rough idea of when the movie is set. However, we have to consider more than just places when determining when Brave is set. We also have to consider the dialogue. And be warned, the timeline is about to get messy. Several scenes in Brave contain lines of dialogue that hint at the history behind Merida's world. One such scene is the meeting of the clans, where the visiting lords each introduce their sons and boast of the boys' exploits. The first to speak is Lord Mackintosh.
Your Majesty, I present my heir and scion, who defended our land from the northern invaders and, with his own sword, stabbed Blooder, vanquished 1,000 foes.
He mentions northern invaders. The Vikings lived north of Scotland. Sure enough, listen to what Lord MacGuffin says.
Good Majesty, I present my eldest son, who scuttled the Viking longships, and with his bare hands vanquished 2,000 foes.
These lines indicate that the clans in Brave recently fought off a Viking invasion, and Merida actually confirms this in her speech to the lords later in the film.
Our kingdom is young. Our stories are not yet legend, but in them our bond was struck. Our clans were once enemies, but when invaders threatened us from the sea, you joined together to defend our lands. My dad rallied your forces and you made him your king. It was an alliance forged in bravery and friendship.
So when did this war between clans and Vikings happen? The Vikings began raiding Scotland around the year 795. These raids continued, and by 850 the various clans of Scotland began to unite to defend themselves against the invaders. This conflict finally ended around the 11th century, when a united Scottish kingdom formed and the old Viking culture died out. This means that the war that united the clans must have taken place sometime between the 9th and 11th centuries. However, there are some problems with this theory. First, the castles that inspired Castle Dunbroch weren't built until the 13th and 14th centuries, hundreds of years after the Viking Wars. Plus, there's one more line of dialogue that complicates our timeline even further. Listen to what Lord Dingwall says when he introduces his son.
I present my only son, who was besieged by 10,000 Romans And he took out a whole armada single-handedly. With one arm, he was steering the ship, and with the other, he held his mighty sword and struck down the whole attacking fleet.
Lies!
What? I heard that. Fine. Say it to my face.
Dingwall claims that his son fought the Romans. Now, the Romans did invade Scotland, and the Scottish clans did do battle with them, but these conflicts took place from the 1st through the 5th centuries, hundreds of years before the Viking invasions. So Dingwall's claim makes no sense. Now, to be fair, he seems to be obviously lying in this scene, and someone from the crowd even calls him out immediately. So maybe we're not supposed to take his claim seriously. Still, our timeline is looking really muddled. Does Brave take place during the Roman times, during the Viking times, or sometime after? Maybe some statements from the filmmakers can clear things up. As it turns out, Brave does have an official setting. In his book, The Disney Princess, author Charles Solomon explained that director Brenda Chapman and her crew set Brave in the 10th century CE. That means that the movie takes place long after Roman times, in a time when the Vikings have already begun raiding Scotland, but before the clans of Scotland have united into one unified kingdom. But wait, didn't Merida say her dad was the king? Isn't Scotland already a unified kingdom by the time of Brave? Well, yes and no. Merida says her dad is the king, but she also calls his kingdom an alliance. That's because their kingdom is really something between a state and a confederation of clans. Dr. Grant Jarvie described this period of Scottish history this way. An initial unification process took place between about AD 843 and about AD 1050. However, it would be wrong to think of this initial Scottish formation as a unified state. Despite their relative allegiance to the monarchy, there was as yet no notion of law that could be applied to all the different groups. Each of them had distinct characteristics and interests. Each of them had a degree of power relative to the others, and each was prone to rebellion. During phases in which the Norse threat of domination was high, bonding of these Scottish groups was strong. During periods in which the threat of domination was reduced, unification was prone to degrees of instability. Now, Merida's castle is designed to look like castles built after this period, and that is an anachronism. However, Brave's filmmakers have gone on record saying they were willing to include anachronisms like that if they thought it would serve the story. As production designer Steve Pilcher said, "We would call it the 10th century as a way of planting a stake in the ground, but still giving ourselves permission to include elements that may have emerged sometime later." Based on the movie's locations, dialogue, and statements from its filmmakers, I'm placing Pixar's Brave in the Scottish Highlands in the 10th century. So, there you have it. That is my theory for when and where Disney and Pixar's Brave takes place. Please let me know in the comments what you thought of my conclusions and when and where you think Brave takes place. Also, tell me which Disney movie you would like me to analyze next. Please don't forget to like and subscribe so that you don't miss another video and our channel has a chance to grow. And as always, thank you very much for watching. I will see you next time. Bye-bye.